He was yelling at the TV like it had personally betrayed him. His hands were tight around the controller, jaw clenched, eyes glued to the screen as the game froze for half a second. And then kicked him out. "You've got to be kidding me," he shouted, blaming the internet, blaming the PlayStation, blaming everything except the girl sitting silently a few feet away. I was on the couch, phone in my hand, face relaxed, pretending to scroll. My heart was beating fast. But not from fear, from control, because what he didn't know, what he never even suspected, was that the internet didn't fail him that night. I did, and that was only the beginning. Asterisk if you've ever stayed quiet while someone chipped away at your self-respect. If you've ever smiled through disrespect just to keep the peace, then listen closely. This isn't loud revenge, this is patient revenge. Like the video, subscribe, and settle in because this story burns slow and it burns deep. Asterisk I was 20 years old when I realized that being in a relationship doesn't automatically mean you're loved. Sometimes it just means you're tolerated. From the outside, my life looked stable. We lived together, we paid bills, we had routines, grocery days, Netflix nights. To anyone looking in, we were normal. But inside that apartment, I was constantly adjusting myself to fit into his moods, his temper, his comfort. I didn't notice it at first. You never do. It happens gradually, quietly, until one day you wake up and realize you don't speak your mind anymore because it's easier not to. In the beginning, he wasn't a bad guy. That's the hardest part to explain to people who haven't lived it. He was charming, confident. The kind of guy who knew how to talk to people, who filled a room without trying. I mistook his confidence for maturity, I mistook his sarcasm for intelligence, and I mistook the little red flags for personality quirks. When he teased me, I told myself it was playful. When his joke stung, I told myself I was just sensitive. When something he said made my stomach twist, I swallowed it and smiled anyway. The drinking changed him, but not in the dramatic way people imagine. He didn't become violent. He didn't scream in my face, he became careless, and careless words, repeated often enough, leave bruises you can't point to. He liked to call me names when he drank, not constantly, not every night. Just enough to keep me off balance, just enough that I started anticipating it. And the word he seemed to reach for the easiest was bitch. The first time he said it, my body reacted before my mind could catch up, my chest tightened. Like the air had been sucked out of the room, my face got hot. I remember laughing, forcing it, because I didn't want to be the girl who can't take a joke. He followed it immediately with, relax, I'm joking. Like that erased the word. Like intent mattered more than impact, but words don't disappear just because someone pretends they were kidding. They sit with you, they echo. That night, lying next to him while he slept peacefully, the word replayed in my head over and over again. Bitch. Each time it repeated, something inside me cracked just a little more. He didn't stop. He said it when he was annoyed, he said it when I disagreed with him. He said it when he was drinking and felt untouchable, and every time, if I reacted at all, I became the problem. I was too emotional, overreacting, always starting something. So eventually, I stopped reacting, I stopped defending myself. I stopped explaining how it made me feel. Silence became survival. But silence doesn't mean nothing is happening, it just means everything is happening inside. There was one thing in that apartment he loved more than anything else, his PlayStation. That console controlled his mood, his patience, the entire emotional climate of our home. When he played, everything revolved around it. He'd lean forward on the couch, headset on, completely absorbed, yelling at teammates, yelling at enemies, fully alive in a digital world where he felt powerful when the game was running smoothly. He was relaxed, almost pleasant. When it wasn't, the tension in the room was immediate. Any lag, any glitch, any delay sent him spiraling. He'd slam the controller down, swear loudly, pace the room, blaming the servers, blaming the internet, and somehow, even when the problem had nothing to do with me, I always ended up catching the frustration. Can you stop walking around? Why are you making noise? You're so annoying right now. And after a few drinks, it always came back to that word, like a habit. Like he enjoyed reminding me where he thought I stood. The night everything shifted wasn't dramatic. No shouting match, no tears. He was drinking and playing online with his friends. I was sitting nearby, quiet, scrolling through my phone, barely making a sound. He started telling a story about me, twisting details, exaggerating, turning me into a joke. His friends laughed through their headsets. I sat there listening to myself become a punchline, realizing I was invisible even though I was right there. And then he said it again. Yeah, she's being a bitch about it. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't ask him to stop. I just looked at him and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not sadness, not embarrassment. Anger, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't explode, it focuses. In that moment, I understood something very clearly. He didn't respect me. And if he didn't respect me, I didn't owe him patience anymore. I picked up my phone, still pretending to scroll. And that's when I remembered something he'd shown me weeks earlier without a second thought. The internet app, the one that lets you see every device connected to the Wi-Fi. I opened it slowly, casually, like I was doing nothing important, and there it was, his PlayStation. Listed neatly among the devices, my heart started beating faster. Not from fear, but from clarity. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't powerless. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. I thought about every insult I'd swallowed, every time I'd laughed something off to keep the peace. Every night I'd lain awake replaying words he never apologized for. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel nervous. I felt calm, focused. Like I was finally holding something he cared about. I hovered my thumb over the screen, one tap. Just one, and in that quiet moment, sitting beside the man who thought he had all the power, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud, sometimes it just has to be precise. I tapped the PlayStation. I remember how still I felt in that moment, not frozen out of fear, but because I didn't want to give anything away. He was sitting right there, just a few feet from me, leaning forward on the couch with his elbows on his knees, headset snug over his ears, fingers moving confidently over the controller. He was completely immersed, laughing with his friends, talking trash, sounding relaxed and comfortable in a way he almost never was with me. I was beside him, physically present, but emotionally invisible, my phone glowing softly in my hand while my thumb hovered over the screen. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, slow but heavy, like something important was about to happen. I didn't rush it. I didn't act impulsively. I waited. I watched the game on the TV from the corner of my eye. I listened to his tone, the way his voice lifted when he was winning, the way he sounded confident, untouchable. This was his safe space, his escape, the one place where he felt powerful and in control. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I was holding something that could crack that illusion, quietly, invisibly, without him ever knowing where it came from. I finally tapped the PlayStation icon. Nothing dramatic happened at first. No sound, no warning, just a brief pause on the screen, barely noticeable. Then his character stopped moving, the game stuttered, and a second later, the screen flashed with the message he hated more than anything else: disconnected from server. He froze. For a split second, he just stared at the TV like his brain hadn't caught up yet. Then he pulled the headset slightly off one ear. "What the hell?" he muttered. His friends' voices continued through the headset, confused, asking what happened. He didn't answer them right away. He leaned forward, squinting at the screen, like staring harder might fix it. I stayed perfectly still, eyes down, scrolling aimlessly. My face neutral. Inside, something warm and electric spread through my chest. He started troubleshooting immediately. I had seen this routine before. He checked the Wi-Fi symbol on the PlayStation. He backed out of the game menu. He shook his head, already annoyed. "Internet better not be acting up," he said, half to himself, half to his friends. I glanced up just enough to see him grab his phone and check his connection. His phone was fine. Full bars, no issues. He frowned, irritation creeping into his face. I said nothing. He stood up abruptly and walked over to the router, crouching down in front of it like it had personally betrayed him. He stared at the blinking lights, waiting for something to look wrong. Everything was normal. I watched him from the couch, heart pounding, my phone resting casually in my lap. The power in that moment wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive, it was controlled. And that control felt intoxicating. "Internet's fine," he muttered, more annoyed now. He walked back to the couch, sat down harder than necessary, and pulled the headset fully off. "Hold on," he told his friends, "my PlayStation's acting stupid." I waited. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. He restarted the PlayStation. As the screen went black and the console powered down, I quietly tapped my phone again and restored the internet connection. Perfect timing. He watched the startup screen, irritation slowly easing as everything appeared to load normally. I could almost feel his relief. The problem was solved, or so he thought. He logged back in, rejoined the party. His friends joked about his trash internet. He laughed it off, confidence returning, posture relaxing. He leaned forward again, controller steady in his hands. The game loaded, the match started. And just as he got comfortable, just as he settled back into that smug sense of control, I disconnected it again. This time, the reaction was instant. "What the, are you serious?" he shouted, ripping the headset off completely and throwing it onto the couch. The screen flashed the same message again. Disconnected. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration pouring off him in waves. I could feel it in the room. I could almost taste it. And I stayed quiet, calm, invisible. He stood up again, pacing. "Now, this is bullshit," he snapped. "It was just working." He checked his phone again, Still connected, perfect signal. He glanced at me briefly, irritation flickering in his eyes. Like he wanted to blame someone but couldn't quite justify it. I met his look with a blank expression and went back to my phone. No reaction, no guilt, no smile. Inside, I felt something shift. For so long, every time he was frustrated, it spilled onto me. His bad mood became my problem, his anger found a home in my silence. But now, for the first time, his frustration had nowhere to go. He was angry, confused, powerless, and there was nothing he could do about it. He reset the PlayStation again, checked cables, checked settings, restarted the router just in case. Each step made him more irritated. His friends waited in the party, teasing him, telling him to hurry up. Dude, your internet's trash, one of them laughed. He snapped back defensively, insisting it wasn't. I sat there, listening, my phone warm in my hand. My thumb hovering patiently. I let it boot up again. I let him reconnect. I let him start another match, and then, one more time, I pulled the plug. This time, he didn't yell right away. He just stared at the screen in disbelief, jaw tight, eyes narrow. Like he was trying to understand how something that made no sense could keep happening. There's no way, he said quietly. There's just no way. I felt a calm satisfaction settle over me. Not excitement, not guilt, just a steady sense of balance being restored. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying. I wasn't begging for respect. I was simply reminding myself that I wasn't powerless. I had just been quiet. Eventually, I stopped. I restored the connection and left it alone. The game stayed connected. Everything worked perfectly. He sat back down slowly, suspicious now. Like the PlayStation might betray him again at any moment. He played. But he wasn't relaxed anymore. He was tense, on edge, watching for the next disconnect. I watched him instead, that night. He never called me a name. He barely spoke to me at all. His attention was locked on the screen. But the confidence was gone. Something had shaken him, even if he didn't know what it was. And as I lay in bed later, listening to him complain to his friends about random internet issues, I smiled quietly into the darkness. He had no idea this was just the beginning. After that first night, something changed in the apartment. It wasn't obvious. No big confrontation, no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. But the air felt different. Like a low electrical hum you could sense even when nothing was visibly wrong. He kept playing his games, but he wasn't relaxed anymore. The confidence he used to sink into that couch with was gone. Instead, there was tension in his shoulders, a tightness in his jaw. Like he was bracing himself for something he didn't understand, and I noticed everything. The next evening, he turned on the PlayStation again, but this time he checked the Wi-Fi first. I watched him from the kitchen as he pulled out his phone, stared at the signal bars, then glanced toward the router like it might be hiding something from him. He didn't say anything to me. He didn't need to. I could see the suspicion forming, the doubt, the sense that something was off, even if he couldn't explain why. I didn't touch my phone that night. Not once. I wanted him to think about it, to replay it in his head, to convince himself it was a fluke, and that's exactly what he did. He played for hours with no issues, slowly relaxing, laughing again, settling back into that familiar rhythm. I could almost feel him telling himself he'd overreacted, that it was just a bad night, that nothing was wrong. That was the thing about this kind of revenge. It wasn't about constant punishment. It was about timing. 2 nights later, he was drinking again. Louder this time, more careless. His jokes started landing sharper. He was losing patience more easily. At one point, I asked him a simple question about dinner, and he sighed dramatically like I'd interrupted something important. Can you not right now? He snapped. Later, when his team lost a match, he muttered it again under his breath, that word like muscle memory. Like he couldn't help himself. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, but this time, it didn't turn into hurt. It turned into focus. I picked up my phone. I waited longer than before. I let him win a match. I let him get comfortable. I let him lean forward, fully immersed. Voice confident, laughing with his friends like nothing in the world could touch him. I watched his posture, his breathing. The exact moment when he relaxed into thinking everything was fine, then I disconnected it. The reaction was immediate and violent. He ripped the headset off and stood up so fast the couch shifted. No, he said, pacing. His friends started talking over each other, asking what happened. He didn't answer. He went straight to the router again, crouching in front of it, staring at the lights like they might blink the truth at him. Everything was normal again. I stayed quiet. I always stayed quiet. He restarted the PlayStation. I reconnected the internet. While it booted, same pattern, same illusion of control being restored. He sat down again. Jaw tight, shoulders tense. If this happens again, I swear, he muttered, trailing off. And just as he loaded back into the game, Just as his friend started teasing him about his trash setup, I did it again, this time. He slammed the controller down so hard it bounced. "What the hell is wrong with this thing?" he shouted. He was sweating now, real frustration, not just annoyance. The kind that crawls under your skin and won't leave. His friends laughed at first, then started questioning him. "Dude, that's weird. That doesn't make sense, maybe. Your PlayStation's dying." I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me, not joy, not excitement. Something colder. Something steadier. He spent the rest of the night troubleshooting, Googling, restarting, checking settings, complaining. I watched from the couch, invisible, my phone face down in my lap. He never once looked at me with suspicion. Why would he? In his mind, I was passive, quiet, harmless. That was the role he'd assigned me. And I let him keep believing it. Over the next few weeks, it became a pattern, not every night. Never predictable. Sometimes days would pass with no issues at all. Other times, I'd disconnect it once, sometimes twice, rarely more than that, just enough to make it feel random. Just enough to make it impossible to diagnose. I learned his habits. I learned when to strike. Always mid-match, always when he was invested. Always when the loss would sting. And slowly, it started getting to him. He stopped laughing as much when he played. He checked the connection constantly. He'd pause mid-game to glance at the Wi-Fi symbol. He started snapping at his friends when they joked about it, defensive, irritable, embarrassed. I listened as he tried to explain it to them, struggling to make it sound logical. It just drops sometimes, but only on the PlayStation. Everything else is fine. They didn't believe him, neither did he. One night, I overheard him say something that made me smile. "I think my internet's haunted," he joked, but his laugh didn't reach his eyes. There was real confusion there, real frustration. He was losing something important to him, and he didn't know why, and every time he felt that helpless anger, I thought about all the nights I'd swallowed my own. What surprised me most was how it changed him outside of gaming. He was shorter with me, quieter, less confident. He drank more, complained more. And for the first time, there were moments when he hesitated before insulting me. Like he didn't quite have the energy for it anymore, like something else was already draining him. His friends started noticing too. "Man, you always having issues lately." One of them said one night, "Maybe you should get a new console." Another suggested calling the internet provider. He tried. They found nothing. Everything checked out. Perfect signal, perfect speed, no explanation. I listened from the next room as he hung up the phone, defeated. "They say it's fine," he muttered, "but it's not." I knew, and the longer it went on, the more I realized something important. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about balance. For so long, I had absorbed his frustration, his disrespect, his anger. Now, he was forced to sit with it himself. And it was eating at him. He never once suspected me, not even when I sat right next to him, not even when I watched him lose his mind, not even when I held the power in my hand, because to him, I was just the quiet girl on the couch. And that was exactly how I wanted it. By this point, the PlayStation wasn't fun for him anymore. I could see it before he ever said it out loud. The way he hesitated before turning it on. The way he sighed when the loading screen came up. The way his body stayed tense even during matches that used to make him laugh. Gaming had been his escape, his comfort, his sense of control. Now it was something else entirely, a source of stress. A reminder that something in his life wasn't working the way it should. And the best part was that he couldn't explain it. The disconnects didn't happen every night. That was intentional. Some nights, I let everything run perfectly. I let him relax just enough to believe the problem was gone. I let him joke again, trash talk his friends, lean forward on the couch like he used to. I let his confidence rebuild slowly. Because confidence makes the fall harder. Then, on nights when he'd had a few drinks, when his tone got sharper, when that familiar disrespect started creeping back into his voice, I reminded him. Always mid-match, always at the worst possible moment. One night, his team was about to win. I could hear it in his voice, the excitement, the adrenaline. He was shouting instructions, completely locked in. I waited. I watched the timer on the screen. 10 seconds left. 5. Just as victory was within reach, I disconnected it. The screen froze. Then black. Disconnected. He didn't yell right away. This time, he just stared. He stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. Like if he stared long enough it might explain itself. His friends were yelling in his headset, asking where he went, what happened. He didn't answer. He slowly set the controller down, rubbed his face with both hands, and leaned back against the couch like all the energy had been sucked out of him. "I don't understand," he said quietly, not angry, confused. That was new. He started troubleshooting again, but the rage was gone. In its place was something heavier, doubt. He reset the PlayStation, checked the router, checked his phone, everything fine, always fine. He reconnected, played another match, finished the night without another issue. But he wasn't the same. He was quieter, more withdrawn, and for the first time since I'd known him. He went to bed early without saying much, lying next to him. In the dark, I listened to his breathing, uneven, restless. He wasn't sleeping well anymore. And I knew why. Over the next couple of weeks, his friends stopped laughing about it. At first, they joked, teased him, blamed his setup. Now, they were confused too. That's weird, man. That shouldn't be happening, maybe? It's your account. He tried everything they suggested. New cables, different ports, factory resets. Nothing worked, and every failed attempt chipped away at him. I overheard him on voice chat one night, frustration bleeding through his words. It only happens to me. Everything else works. My phone's fine, her phone's fine. It's just the PlayStation. He paused. It's like it knows when I'm playing. I almost laughed. The disconnect started affecting more than just his games. He snapped more easily at his friends. He drank more, complained more, and yet, something interesting happened with me. The name calling slowed down, not completely, but noticeably, like he didn't have the energy for it anymore. Like whatever fight he used to direct at me was being consumed somewhere else. There were moments when he caught himself before saying it. Moments when he sighed instead of insulting me. Moments when he just stayed quiet, and every time that happened, I felt a strange mix of emotions, satisfaction, yes, but also clarity. I could see the pattern so clearly now. He lashed out when he felt powerful. When that power slipped, the cruelty slipped with it. One evening, he came home irritated before even turning on the console. I don't even know if I want to play tonight, he said, rubbing his temples. It's just going to mess up again. He said it like the PlayStation had personally wronged him, like it was an unreliable friend. I nodded sympathetically, keeping my voice soft, supportive. That sucks, I said. And I meant it, just not in the way he thought. When he did play, he hovered over the console like it might explode. He checked the Wi-Fi symbol every few minutes, paused games to test the connection. He wasn't enjoying himself at all. And when the disconnect came, because of course it did, he didn't yell, he didn't throw anything. He just exhaled sharply and muttered, "I'm done." He turned it off. That was the first time I realized how far this had gone. I hadn't just annoyed him. I had changed his relationship with the one thing he loved most. His escape had become a source of anxiety. His safe space was gone. And he still had no idea why. A few nights later, I heard him tell his friends something that felt like the beginning of the end. I might just sell it, he said, or stop playing. It's not even fun anymore. There was frustration in his voice, but also resignation, like he was tired of fighting something he couldn't understand. I sat on the couch beside him, silent, my phone resting innocently in my hand. He never looked at it, never questioned it, never imagined that the girl he'd underestimated for so long had been quietly rewriting the balance of power. By then, I wasn't even doing it for revenge anymore. I was doing it because I could, because I had learned something about him, about us. He only felt comfortable being cruel when he felt in control, and once that control was gone, so was his edge. The apartment felt different now, quieter. He was smaller somehow, less loud, less certain, and for the first time since I'd known him, I felt steady, grounded, like I wasn't constantly bracing myself for the next insult. He still didn't know. Not even close. Asterisk. By the time he stopped playing altogether, it almost felt anticlimactic. Not because it wasn't satisfying, but because I had already watched the change happen piece by piece. The PlayStation didn't leave his life in a dramatic moment. There was no big declaration, no final rage. It faded out the same way his respect for me had faded in, slowly, quietly, without ceremony. At first, he just played less. Days would pass without him turning it on. When he did, it felt more like a chore than an escape. He'd sit there tense, checking the connection before even starting a game, sighing like he already expected disappointment. Sometimes he'd quit mid-match at the first sign of lag, muttering under his breath. Shoulders slumped. Other times, he wouldn't even bother trying. He'd pick up his phone instead, scroll aimlessly, restless and irritated in a way he couldn't explain. His friends noticed. "Man, you never play anymore," one of them said one night. "Yeah, what happened to you?" Another joked. He brushed it off at first, said he was busy, said he was bored of it, but I could hear the frustration underneath his words. Eventually, the truth started slipping out. "It's just not worth it," he admitted once. "Something's wrong with it. It's always acting up." His friends suggested fixes, upgrades, new routers, new consoles. He nodded along. But there was no real hope in his voice anymore. He had tried everything, and nothing worked. What he never said, what he couldn't bring himself to admit, was that the PlayStation had stopped making him feel powerful. And that changed everything. Without that outlet, his anger didn't have a clear direction anymore. Sometimes it turned inward. He grew quieter, more withdrawn. Other times, It came out sideways, short comments, heavy sighs, irritation over small things. But the name-calling almost disappeared entirely. Not because he suddenly respected me, but because he didn't have the same confidence he used to. He wasn't riding that high anymore. He was tired, frustrated, off balance. And for the first time in the relationship, I felt calm. I didn't flinch when he spoke. I didn't brace myself for insults. I didn't replay arguments in my head at night. Something had shifted permanently. The power dynamic he'd relied on was gone, and without it, the relationship felt hollow, quiet. Like a structure that had lost its foundation but was still standing out of habit. Eventually, he stopped pretending the console was coming back into his life. It sat there, untouched, collecting dust. Once, I heard him say casually, "I don't even use it anymore." Another time, he mentioned maybe selling it. He never did. It was like admitting defeat without saying the words, and then, slowly, the relationship itself started to unravel, not in a dramatic explosion. Not in a single fight. It ended the same way it had lived, through distance, silence, and the realization that something fundamental was broken. We talked less, we shared less. The apartment felt like a place we both passed through rather than lived in. One night, after an argument that barely even qualified as one, I realized I was done, not angry, not heartbroken. Just done. Leaving was easier than I thought it would be. By then, I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel powerless. I had already reclaimed something important long before I packed a bag. When I walked away, it wasn't dramatic. I didn't tell him what I'd done. I didn't explain anything. I didn't need closure from him. I already had it. Years later, I heard through mutual friends that he doesn't use PlayStation anymore, not because of time, not because of money. He just stopped. Something about it never felt right again. The random disconnects, the frustration, the stress, they ruined it for him. He never figured out why, and he never will. Sometimes I think about telling him, about watching his face as the realization hit, but then I remember something important. The best part of this revenge wasn't watching him suffer. It was knowing that I didn't have to say a word. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to beg for respect. I simply stopped absorbing his cruelty and let it land where it belonged. I don't regret it. Because here's the truth. I wasn't trying to ruin his life. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I just wanted him to feel, for once, what it was like to be confused, frustrated, and powerless. The way I had felt every time he laughed off an insult, every time he dismissed my feelings, every time he made me feel small. And the irony is, I didn't become a bitch to do it. I just became quiet, observant, and patient. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't leave scars you can point to. Sometimes it just teaches someone that power isn't permanent. And disrespect always comes with a cost. Asterisk if this story made you feel something, satisfaction, anger, relief, hit that like button, subscribe for more real, slow burn Reddit revenge stories. And tell me in the comments, what's the most quietly satisfying revenge you've ever seen? Because the best revenge is the one they never see coming.